Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to thank Pamela Better Half Ferguson for the invitation. Here we go. So I thought I'd start, just a quick one, but I'd share, I don't know how many of you had an opportunity to get out to the cruise port 2019 or prior, but actually it was a real mess, and it was to think that the cruise port, Prince George Wharf, was the single largest tourism gateway to our country, the Bahamas. And when you went out there, you had literally bits of Festival Place, which was the arrivals terminal, falling down around you, literally falling down around you. The condition of buildings, huge excavations that had happened along the walkways that these tourists were welcome to. And that was the first and the last impression that they had when they came to Nassau. And for many of them, it was their only experience visiting the Bahamas. This slide speaks to the investment that's been happening for decades in the Bahamas, and specifically outside of the city of Freeport and outside the city of Nassau. And there's been a lot of talk around cruise sector investments. And so there's about $2.5 billion worth of investment, hard money that's gone into fixed assets, sunk costs within and throughout our family islands. Great Stirrup Key, Castaway Key, Coco Key, these are the Berry Islands, Ocean Key, Half Moon Key, just south of Eleuthera, Princess Key, Eleuthera, obviously Royal Caribbean right at Paradise Island, Lighthouse Point, Eleuthera, and then Grand Bahama with Carnival. A lot of those numbers that Pam was speaking to in terms of the volume, cruise or tourism volumes and so forth, obviously with cruise tourism being the lion's share, are actually coming to these private destinations. And some will look at that and say, how did we let that happen? But the fact is, that's an opportunity. That's $2.5 billion worth of sunk costs that are in our country, invested in our country. The Bahamas is the most important country there's other very valuable states, let's call it, like Alaska, but the Bahamas as a country is very, very important and significant to the industry. There's an opportunity to better leverage that partnership because of this dependence that you clearly see before you. The CFAL impact. Obviously, I need to give a shout out to CFAL for all the great work they've done. And CFAL has been instrumental in delivering and supporting this rehabilitation of our single largest gateway, tourism gateway, here in the capital city of Nassau. And again, to remind many of you, back in 2020, when the cruise industry was at a standstill, there was many discussions around would it ever return? Would these ships ever come back? Would people ever get back on a cruise ship? And the fact is, with the support and partnership of CFAL, we were able to raise $134 million at a time when nothing was sailing. It was unbelievable. The financing that happened in 2020 directly resulted in the rebound of the industry. Many of you will know, but many of you won't know, that cruise operations in this part of the world actually started at Nassau, coming out of the pandemic with the Adventure of the Seas, which was home porting right at Nassau Cruise Port. And it's because they couldn't get operating in Florida. They started right here. They were flying their guests in. They were going through all the medical stuff at the Hilton, British Colonial, and then they were busing themselves over to the cruise port. And it was CFAL, in partnership with CFAL, that made it all happen. And the investment and the monies, the local monies, and what I'm very proud of, and it was touched on earlier, is that the monies that launched the industry, launched our biggest tourism share, was actually Bahamian investment. It was us Bahamians that reached into our pockets and got this industry back on its feet, not foreigners. In 2021, when it was time to bring on additional debt because of the project moving along, It was that investment that happened of the $134 million, obviously, that helped to reduce the risk profile of the project, because foreign investors could come in and see the piers were under construction, the berths were under construction, dredging was happening and so forth, and activities were underway. And so again, that helped us to bring the other $110 million. And then we had the BIF, Bahamas Investment Fund, which was an SPV created by Anthony Ferguson. And that brought Bahamian equity participation to the project. And it's obviously been very successful, given the number of dividends, the amount of dividends that have gone to the Bahamian shareholders. And this really is a story about public-private partnerships. And there was a story, Pam was speaking about resilience. We have such an opportunity to leverage and be in search for and set up RFPs around these public-private partnerships. And the Nassau Container Port is a public-private partnership. Nassau Cruise Port is a public-private partnership. And what some don't stop and think about is the fact that the government didn't have to put a penny into this. The government had to issue a lease to someone else that was taking on all the risk of raising what is now about $350 million with the expansions that we've had. The government gets an annual rental fee for the site that we have to pay them. The government sees an incremental over 2 million passengers beyond the highest number that we had in 2019 of 3.85 million. So they get that 2 million additional passengers times the head tax as additional. Would not have happened without this. And they get a brand new waterfront downtown. And they didn't have to spend a dime. Why wouldn't you do public-private partnerships? So today, as part of our project, to the right you have the new pier, new East Pier as I describe it. The ships are getting bigger, and I have a slide that you'll see in a few minutes that basically describes our anticipated volumes in 2026. And you'll see that those volumes really aren't much different than what we expect to do from a ship call perspective in 2025. But yet, the passenger volumes are 600,000 passengers greater in 26 than they are going to be this year. And the reason for that is these ships are so much larger. And it's through the investments that we've made in infrastructure, marine infrastructure, that has been able to make that happen. And so building new piers, doing additional dredging, we actually expanded the port area by about 50%. Where you see that arrow that says Port Plaza, everything to your left was actually reclaimed. We took the dredge material from that new East Pier area and actually filled in that area there to create more of an experience area down there that runs along Wood Rogers Wharf. And then something that's been very important is that when we looked at the project initially, what was happening with a lot of our tours were that they were coming off the ships, going right onto a water taxi or a marine tour excursion, and leaving from the piers and then returning to the piers. What happens today is that where you see the new ferry terminal, these passengers depart from that area, but then they return to the West Marina and ferry piers to your left. And that forces about 1 million people per year that may have left from the east side of the port to return to the west, which gives those 1 million people an opportunity to walk through the straw market, walk through town, and meander back to the ship, rather than delivering them right to the gangway. And so that was very intentional. The other thing that we have recognized is that the Bahamas and Nassau specifically has been blessed in that approximately 1 out of every 2 visitors, cruise visitors, has been here before. And because of that, you run into this circumstance of, why should I get off the ship? I've seen it before. And here's a situation where through the investment, through the activation of experiences and music and everything else, even if they've been here 5 times before, they want to get off the ship because there's something else they're likely going to see, some new experience they're going to have. And so that's very important, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. Part of the exercise that we had through this development process was bringing in those local entrepreneurs and retail operators and F&B operators. And we just didn't give them a space to operate from. We have MyOcean left, we have Vita Cayo bottom left, and we House of Assembly bottom right. But we brought in merchandisers from the US that provided training and support. along with displays and so forth to support our partners so that on that day that they opened up, they were really offering something that was to be proud of and something that was to be featured. The port is not just a cruise port. We are a destination. I don't know how many of you have been down to the port to experience the concerts and the festivities and so forth, but we pretty regularly have different events. We had Eddie Minnis, we do Super Bowl parties, we had Taurus Riley, Ed Sea is actually an interesting one on the top right. That's actually a cruise ship that was chartered, and the charterer rented the space from us. So they brought their ship in, brought their 4,000 people off, and they had a party at the amphitheater. And that's never happened before. And then we have the Super Bowl activities and so forth. But I would encourage you, how many here have never been to the cruise port for one of these events? Shame on you. You know, it's not too late to get life insurance, and it's not too late to get to the cruise port. But get to the cruise port before you get the life insurance. We talk about opportunities here, and we were looking at that slide of all the private destinations that exist, but we have an opportunity right here in front of us. And Pam also spoke, I think, about the 1.7 stayover visitors that come to Nassau. We have about 25% of the visitors that come to the cruise port don't get off the ship. And that doesn't mean we're not out there marketing and selling and promoting and these types of things. The fact is that we have not yet done a good enough job to get them off that ship. So you have 1.5 million opportunities. These are folks that are within feet. You don't have to put them on an airplane. You have an opportunity to sell to them, to market to them, to give them a reason. And I have spoken repeatedly over the last few years about it's not anything that we should be angry with them about. It is on us to create experiences and opportunities and the value proposition to have them to want to get off the ship. When you vacation, no one is telling you if you come visit Paris, you have to spend $1,000. You're going to Paris, and it's based off your experiences that cause you to spend that $1,000. It's no different here. It's on us to make this happen. But that is an opportunity. At the port, there's been a lot of talk about this pool that we're doing at the port. Yes, we most certainly are constructing a pool. It most certainly will be finished by December of this year. I'm sorry to say that it's not the size of Atlantis. It's not the size of Bahamas. It is a pool that, honestly, you could probably see something of that size in one of those mansions out at Lyford Key. But it is a very nice pool, and it's intended to be one of the additional attractions that cause someone to rethink about why they would want to stay on the ship. It is not intended to capture, control anybody. It's only got a capacity of about 250 people. We have days of 30,000 visitors. We have to create these experiences. The image I gave you of the cruise port is really a story about we've got to give these people something to do. We spent, I would say, about $30 million on ferry piers and ground transportation areas to facilitate taxi and tour buses and water transportation to take people someplace out of the port. And we have to do that because we have to give these people an experience, and we can't do it by keeping them locked away inside of the cruise port. We're also looking at the future in terms of reducing that carbon footprint. And so in partnership with Arawak Key, we are going to be bringing in shore power. That shore power is going to be fueled by LNG and hydrogen. These are the hybrid turbines, so that when hydrogen becomes commercially viable, we can rely on the hydrogen component of it. For the time being, it will be LNG. We would have received all of the technical information from the cruise ships. Each of the cruise lines have volunteered the information to us so that we better understand how to plug in, where to plug into each of these ships. All that's been provided. That's an example of one big extension cord going into what we call a clamshell of the ship, basically a cargo door that would then plug into the ship's generators and so forth. But what it does is it allows you to eliminate all of that exhaust that you see in that picture. And it also serves to support, because you're in partnership with Arawak-Key, you're building a power plant that also can serve the needs of the local community as well in partnership with BPL. So this is most certainly, shore power is most certainly part of the government's environmental and energy program, and it's something that we're quite proud of. If you read down below, this is from CLIA, Cruise Line International Association. It's the largest association of all of the cruise lines. And it tells you that today only 35 ports, comprising less than 3% of the world's cruise ports, currently offer shore power. And those that do, generally speaking, there's only one berth available. But obviously in the case of Nassau, where we have 6 berths, and given Nassau is the busiest transit port in the world. No port handles more transit calls than the Port of Nassau. And so we feel we have a responsibility from an environmental perspective to put in shore power to ensure that when these ships come in, and we want them to come in, they can plug in and we can help them reduce their carbon footprint. Cruise passenger spend in Nassau is impactful, so this gives you some insight in terms of the volume. So back in 2019, it would have been 3.85 million, 2023, 4.5, going to 5.6. This year we estimate at 6.1, we'll do 6.6. And this is what I was talking about in terms of the calls, going from 1,600 this year to 1,610, only 10 more ships, but 600 or 500,000 more passengers, and it's because the ships are getting so much bigger. They're basically pulling out a small ship and putting in a big ship. That's what's happening. Now, the passenger spend is based off of the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association analysis. You can debate 120, you can say it's 80, you can say it whatever it is. But the point is, whatever that number is that you feel comfortable with, multiply it by 6.6 million passengers that are going to be here next year, and that's the potential of what can be spent in town. And we saw it during the pandemic when the entire industry came to a standstill and they basically closed Bay Street. And that's our circumstance, that's our reality at the moment. But that's an opportunity for us. Let's not lose sight of it. And with that, thank you.